The clock showed 4:45 when the alarm went off in the small apartment in East Oakland. Jasmine Reynolds opened her eyes and, for a brief moment, allowed herself the luxury of wishing for 5 more minutes of sleep. But she knew she couldn't afford that luxury. Not when there were bills to pay and dreams to chase. At 24 years old, Jasmine already carried on her shoulders the weight of responsibilities that many of her college peers couldn't even imagine. She got up, prepared a quick coffee, and put on the red and yellow uniform that, for almost 2 years, had defined much of her identity. McDonald's attendant on MacArthur Avenue. "Mom, I left your medicine separated in the kitchen," whispered Jasmine, poking her head into the room where Eleanor was still sleeping. Sleep was the only time her mother found relief from the constant pain of rheumatoid arthritis that attacked her mercilessly. The bus route was always the same. 2 buses and 40 minutes of her life every day. Jasmine took advantage of the time to mentally review the financial accounting class material she would have that night at the Oakland Community College. Each page studied was one step closer to her dream of opening her own catering business for sporting events. "Good morning, everyone," she greeted as she entered through the back door of the restaurant, exactly at 6:30. The morning team was already in position, preparing for the inevitable morning rush. "Jasmine, I need you to cover the drive-through today." "Tiffany called in sick," announced Richard Thompson, the manager, without even raising his eyes from the papers he was reviewing. The lack of a please or thank you didn't surprise Jasmine. It was simply the established dynamic. At 12:30, while serving a Big Mac to an irritated customer who was complaining about the delay, Jasmine mentally calculated how much she would need to save from her next paycheck to cover the 15% increase in rent. The landlord's letter was still on the kitchen table, a constant reminder that stability was a luxury she didn't possess. "Reynolds, mandatory meeting after your shift," Richard shouted from the office, interrupting her calculations. The meeting was brief and direct. Richard, with his impeccably ironed corporate blazer, communicated the franchise's new policy: 0 tolerance for unauthorized courtesies. Any employee caught offering free items, even in exceptional circumstances, would be immediately dismissed. "This applies to everyone," he stated, fixing his gaze on Jasmine. Everyone on the team knew about her occasional kindnesses to confused elderly people or single mothers with hungry children. It was already night when Jasmine finally got home, exhausted after her accounting class. Upon entering her room, the Golden State Warriors poster on the wall was like a window to another world, one where talent and hard work were justly rewarded. Her eyes lingered on the central figure, Stephen Curry. It wasn't just for his perfect shot that she admired him, but for the work he did off the court, helping communities like hers. Her cell phone vibrated with a message from Richard. Reminder: tomorrow we'll have intense movement due to the Warriors game. Arrive 15 minutes early. Jasmine sighed, putting the phone on the charger. As she fell asleep, she didn't imagine that the next day would bring an encounter that would completely change the course of her life. Thursday morning, in T2I2, Oakland dawned under a heavy sky that soon broke into a torrential rain. Jasmine arrived at McDonald's 20 minutes earlier than requested, her hair damp despite the cheap umbrella that folded with a gust of wind on the way. "You look like a wet cat," joked Carlos, the cook, as they prepared the restaurant for the expected movement. The Warriors' game against the Lakers that night meant a constant flow of hungry fans before the match. Richard moved among the employees, adjusting the Warriors, promotional decorations, and repeating instructions about efficiency. "Remember that any failure today will be especially visible," he warned, looking significantly at Jasmine. The afternoon progressed with the usual frantic pace when, around 4 o'clock, the entrance door opened, letting in a blast of cold wind along with a tall man in a hood and dark glasses. Jasmine, reorganizing the counter, was the first to notice him. Something in his posture, in the way he walked, seemed strangely familiar. When he approached the counter, keeping his head down and speaking in a contained voice, she immediately recognized that face, despite the attempt at disguise. "How may I help you?" she asked, striving to maintain professional composure before Stephen Curry, the star who smiled from the poster in her room. "I'm having a small problem," he explained, leaning slightly over the counter. "My car broke down 2 blocks from here. Some electrical problem because of the rain. My cell phone is out of battery, and I forgot my wallet in the car." He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "I just need to make a call to my agent." Without thinking twice, Jasmine took her own phone from her pocket. "Use mine, no problem." While Curry made the call away from the counter, he mentioned that he hadn't eaten anything since breakfast and had an important practice coming up. His stomach audibly growled, confirming the story. Jasmine quickly looked around. Richard was in his weekly meeting with the franchise accountant. Quickly, she assembled a sandwich, added a portion of fries and a soda, and handed it to Curry without going through the cash register. "I can't accept this," he protested. "Please, it's the least I can do after everything you do for the community," Jasmine insisted. "Just promise you'll do your best in today's game." What Jasmine didn't notice were the vigilant eyes of the security cameras. At the exact moment Curry finished eating, profusely thanking her for the help and promising to return to pay, the office door opened violently. "What's going on here?" Richard's voice cut through the air like a blade. Before Jasmine could explain, her manager was already beside her, his face red with anger. "Did you just give away food for free? After yesterday's explicit warning?" "Sir, the situation is my responsibility," Curry intervened, removing his glasses. "I'm without money at the moment, but I can come back to—" "I know who you are," interrupted Richard, momentarily disconcerted by the celebrity's presence. "But rules are for everyone. You," he turned to Jasmine, "are fired." "Look, I can pay 10 times the value of this meal right now by phone," insisted Curry. "The policy is clear, no exceptions." Richard extended his hand. "Your badge and cap, please." With trembling hands, Jasmine handed over her uniform under the astonished gazes of customers and colleagues. Tears threatened to fall, but she contained them, gathering what remained of her dignity to walk to the door. The rain continued relentless when she went out into the street without an umbrella. Curry tried to follow her, but was immediately recognized by a group of teenagers who began to circle around him, asking for photos and autographs. Helpless, he could only watch through the foggy window as Jasmine's silhouette disappeared into the curtain of rain, taking with her not just a lost job, but dreams that now seemed too distant. The job newspaper open on the kitchen table seemed to mock Jasmine the next morning. Red circles marked possible vacancies, but none offered the salary she urgently needed. After a sleepless night, her eyes burned, and her mind kept repeating the humiliation of the previous day. The familiar creaking of the floorboards announced Eleanor's arrival in the kitchen. Even with the support of her cane, each step was visibly painful. "Didn't you go to work today, dear?" asked Eleanor, frowning when she noticed her daughter was still home. Jasmine took a deep breath. "Mom, I was fired yesterday." "Fired? Why?" Eleanor leaned on the edge of the table. In a controlled voice, Jasmine reported the incident, minimizing Curry's presence. "It was just a customer who needed help." Eleanor sat down slowly, taking her daughter's hands in hers. "You did what you thought was right. You always have." "Right doesn't pay bills," replied Jasmine, finally letting a tear escape. "How will we pay for your medicine? The rent increased. My scholarship will decrease." The silence that followed carried the weight of unspoken possibilities. Eleanor reducing her medication, Jasmine dropping out of college, looking for a second job besides the first one she hadn't even secured yet. The afternoon transformed into a succession of closed doors. In each establishment, the same politely indifferent look, the same "we'll send an email if there's interest." As she passed by the McDonald's where she had worked until the day before, Jasmine saw her former colleagues moving frantically to attend to the line that was forming. For a moment, she considered going in and begging Richard for a second chance, but pride, perhaps the only thing she still had left, stopped her. At home, the flashing light on the phone indicated several messages. A colleague mentioned that the internet was on fire with the incident, with many criticizing the manager's inflexible stance. Jasmine deleted the messages one by one. Virtual solidarity didn't pay the rent. At night, she and Eleanor sat down to watch the Warriors game, as they had done since her father was still alive. Each appearance of Curry on the screen provoked in Jasmine a confused mixture of feelings. She didn't blame the player, he had tried to intervene. But seeing him execute brilliant plays while her own life was falling apart seemed a cruel irony of fate. At the end of the third quarter, Eleanor fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from the side effects of the medicines. Jasmine covered her gently, observing the medication bottles lined up on the table. Looking at her laptop, her study instrument, and only hope for a better future, she made a decision that made her heart ache. She would have to sell it to guarantee the medicine for the next month. Turning off the television after the Warriors' narrow victory, Jasmine didn't hear the commentator mention, almost casually, that close sources reported an unusually irritated Steph Curry after an incident at a fast food restaurant that afternoon. The doorbell sounded like an intruder in the quietness of the apartment. It was 9 in the morning, and Jasmine had just returned from a dispiriting interview at a diner across town. She was still wearing her only formal blouse and slightly wrinkled black pants, the makeshift uniform for someone seeking employment without having resources for a more suitable wardrobe. Upon opening the door, she came face to face with an African-American man of approximately 40 years old, wearing an impeccable suit and carrying a leather portfolio. "Jasmine Reynolds?" he asked with a contained smile. "Yes. My name is Raymond Parker, Stephen Curry's personal assistant. Can we talk for a moment?" Jasmine remained motionless, trying to process those words. The man extended an envelope with the Golden State Warriors logo. "Mr. Curry was quite disturbed by the incident from the day before yesterday and spent all of yesterday trying to locate you," explained Raymond. "He would like to speak with you personally. There's a car waiting if you can accompany us." "I don't. How did you find me?" "We have our resources," smiled Raymond. "Mr. Curry is quite persistent when he wants to resolve something." Eleanor appeared in the hallway, supported by her cane, curious about the visitor. After examining the contents of the envelope, an official invitation to visit the Warriors Training Center, she encouraged her daughter. "Go, dear. What do you have to lose?" 30 minutes later, Jasmine found herself in an elegant but discreet conference room. Her heart almost stopped when, besides Curry, she saw the owner of the McDonald'S franchise where she worked and a man who was introduced to her as the team's lawyer. "Jasmine," Curry stood up to greet her. "I want to apologize for the trouble I caused. It was never my intention to jeopardize your job." "It wasn't your fault," she responded automatically. The franchise owner cleared his throat, clearly, uncomfortable. Ms. Reynolds, after taking detailed knowledge of the incident and the disproportionality in the application of our policies, I would like to offer your job back. Jasmine felt momentary relief. Actually, he continued, we would like to promote you to supervisor at our Alameda unit with a 15% raise. As for Mr. Thompson, he has been temporarily removed for a people management requalification program. Before she could respond, Curry raised his hand. That's the least they could do, but I have something different in mind. He explained that, while researching about her, he discovered her dream of entrepreneurship in the area of food for sporting events. The Curry Foundation is initiating a program to provide nutritious meals to young athletes in underprivileged communities in Oakland. We need someone who understands both food and the social impact we want to create. Jasmine could barely breathe as Curry detailed the proposal. A position as project coordinator, with a salary that was almost double what she previously earned and flexible hours to accommodate her studies. Additionally, he added, sliding a folder across the table, the foundation offers a full scholarship for you to complete your education in business administration through our educational program. Why? Was all that Jasmine could ask, tears already blurring her vision. Because the world needs more people like you, who do the right thing even when it has a personal cost, replied Curry, and because I know how to recognize talent when I see it. Upon returning home that afternoon, Jasmine carried not only an employment contract, but also tickets for the entire Warriors season and a check from the Curry Foundation intended to cover her mother's medical costs for a year. When Eleanor saw her enter with a smile she hadn't shown for months, she knew something had changed. Between tears and laughter, mother and daughter embraced, sharing a moment of pure gratitude. Later, as the TV reported the latest community initiative announced by Steph Curry, Jasmine was already scribbling ideas for the food program on the back of the envelope she had received that morning. Sometimes, she reflected, life really does offer three-point shots at the most unexpected moments.